Yes, Vibhu, go ahead.
Thank you, Esma. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to this side event titled Building Back Better Digital Accessibility for Disabilities and Inclusive Education.
Vibu, sorry for interrupting. You have an issue with your audio. Vibu, I will kindly asking you to log out and we'll invite you right back.
Hello, colleagues. Apologies for the technical issues. I'm just going to, I think, in the interest of time, we can just start, and Vibhu will hopefully be able to resolve her tech issues and join us very soon. I want to thank you all for joining. My name is Asma Maladwala. I'm a program specialist in the disability section at Unicef headquarters. And we're very pleased to welcome you all today to this side event on Building Back Better, Digital Accessibility as a Tool to Support Inclusive Education. This side event has been organized by UNICEF with support from the Global Partnership on Education and co-sponsored by the Norway Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as FCDO from the UK. Today in the event, we have American Sign Language with captioning in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And we are posting the link for you to be able to access the captions in other languages. If you would like to do so, it will be posted in the chat box. In order to access the captions, please click on the show subtitle button on your screens. So to start with, while we wait for Vibhu, I would like to welcome and invite our first speaker to open the session, Camilla Fosberg, the Education Policy Director at the Norway Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Norway has been a big supporter for disability inclusion, and we're very pleased for our partnerships and our collaborations. And with that, I would like to welcome Camilla, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Asma. For Norway, education, and particularly assuring that all children, also children with disabilities, get a quality education is a key priority. Securing equal participation for people with disabilities, it is a test of our belief that all human beings are of equal value. Normative framework and the ideals and goals provided by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities continue to serve as a reference for our efforts. The COVID-19 pandemic has been detrimental for education. 2/3 of an academic year has been lost on average worldwide due to COVID-19 school closures. Data from UNESCO shows that overall, about 40% of low and lower middle-income countries have not supported learners at risk of exclusion during COVID-19 pandemic, such as those living in remote areas, the poor, linguistic minorities, and also learners with disabilities. While many countries have relied on distance education, about 1/3 of all students at primary level did not have access to distance education when schools were closed in 2020. This made the most vulnerable groups, such as children with disabilities, even more at risk of learning loss, abuse, and exclusion. However, the COVID-19 pandemic also brought about opportunities and has forced us to rethink what education entails. In 2020, as many as 83% of countries with closed schools used digital platforms for distance education. Increased use of smartphones and internet has given new opportunities to reach children outside of school buildings. Digital learning solutions can enable greater learning independence and give space for self-paced learning. Digital solutions can be a way of adjusting to the needs of the learners. Learners with disabilities could potentially have even more to gain from using appropriate technologies than those without disabilities. We are proud to have contributed to the establishment of the Global Digital Library. The Global Digital Library provides open access to children's books in more than 70 local languages. The library is now working with translation to sign language, export to Braille, and use of artificial intelligence so that blind and partially sighted can use the platform. Also, for us, Unicef continues to be an important partner for the work on education and disability inclusion. Through the Norway Unicef Disability Partnership, we have increased our efforts to ensure effective and meaningful inclusion of children and young persons with disabilities across Unicef's work. At the same time, we are concerned about the unequal opportunities and the digital gap. To ensure new digital pathways for inclusive education, we need to invest in strengthened education systems. We need to support teachers, ensure access to assistive technologies, and find alternative learning methods for those that drop out of school. Digital tools need to be accessible and used appropriately by learners, teachers, and parents. Technology cannot replace a teacher, but it can make it easier for the teachers to teach. Building back better is not primarily necessarily about using new tools for education. What is vital is to make sure that the tools we use are inclusive for those that are at risk of being left behind. Next year, in February 2022, the second Global Disability Summit will take place in Oslo, and it will be digital. As host country, and together with the International Disability Alliance and other partners, Norway will bring together developing countries, organizations of persons with disabilities, multilateral agencies, private sector, NGOs, and donors. Everyone attending this site event today has a role to play in making accessible digital tools for inclusive education a reality. I wish to thank Unicef for convening this seminar and look forward to listening to the speakers. Also, I hope to see you in Oslo online in February 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Vibhu.
Thank you, Esma, and thank you, Camilla. And I apologize. I was talking all the while and I don't know what happened. Thanks, Camilla, for being here with us today. And I know it's particularly late for you in Norway, so thanks a lot. And we are very appreciative of Norway's continuous and significant support to disability inclusion all this while. I want to step back a little and do a little setting up of tone as to why are we hosting this event and why is it so important at this moment. I was particularly thrilled when I was asked to moderate this panel because I am a person with visual impairment. I belong to a developing country where children with disabilities, irrespective of no matter their academic progress, nothing, can be refused admission to a mainstream school solely on the basis of their disability. And it happened to me in my childhood. So themes like inclusive education, access to education, assistive technologies, they're very close to my heart. And that is why I was so delighted when I was asked to moderate this panel. But to put things on a more positive note, I'm thrilled to share that Unicef is launching its accessibility digital portal today. And we are very appreciative and thankful to our colleagues at the Global Partnership for Education, GBE, for their significant support and collaboration in the development of this platform. This portal comes at a very crucial time because we had been advocating for inclusive education for a while now. Whereas in reality, we know that there cannot be access to education or inclusion in education unless there is no access, even if children with disabilities are placed in mainstream schools. And out of about over 100 million children with disabilities living around the world, 80% of them are in developing countries. But children with disabilities placed in mainstream schools, irrespective of whether they are in developed or developing countries, regularly feel discriminated and feel left out because of lack of access to assistive technologies, inflexible curriculum, lack of awareness of mainstream teachers to accommodate children with disabilities in a mainstream classroom, shortage of reading material in accessible media, discrimination, prejudice, stigma, and the list goes on and on. And this clearly means that children with disabilities are marginalized. And now the coronavirus pandemic, which we know has disproportionately impacted persons with disabilities, would only amplify the challenges, pushing the children already marginalized to a greater marginalization. Why? Because during the pandemic, as teaching and learning shifted online, About 400 million children and young people around the world lost access to education. Children with disabilities were left behind because of the inaccessibility of most of the learning solutions that were adopted to continue the process of teaching and learning remotely. But at the same time, the pandemic has given us a unique opportunity to build back better. But what we need to do is to act quickly and develop solutions, digital solutions that can promote and enhance digital accessibility and produce learning content in an accessible media for learners with disabilities. And that is why we are here today. So the panel today is going to be talking to us about presenting or highlighting the impact of the pandemic on the education of learners with disabilities and the challenges that have been aggravated. The panel would also present recommendations to education stakeholders to enhance digital accessibility and would also present solutions to strengthen and enhance and advance inclusion in education. So with this, I would like to introduce one of our panelists, Alicia Herbert, who could not be unfortunately with us, but she has sent us her remarks in a video highlighting the impact of the pandemic. So Asma, may I please request you to play the video for us?
It's a real pleasure to be here today to talk about the impact of the pandemic on education for children with disabilities. We know that learners with disabilities face severe barriers in accessing education, healthcare, social protection and financial assistance. There are an estimated 65 million children with disabilities across the country, and half of them were out of school prior to the pandemic. This makes them the largest group not in school, a staggering 33 million children. The challenges faced by learners with disabilities have been further exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prolonged school closures have threatened to undermine years of progress made towards inclusive education systems. The excellent Leave No Girl with Disabilities Behind report, led by Ungai and Leonard Cheshire, has provided detailed insights. For example, girls with disabilities living in villages, rural indigenous communities, households with limited internet, or with a lack of access to digital services with affordable data, are at greater risk of being left behind through the pandemic, due to a lack of development support for remote learning and inaccessible remote learning materials. Thanks to the efforts of civil society and donors, data from the COVID-19 pandemic will continue to emerge over the coming months and will help to inform our approach to supporting learners with disabilities into education. We can all agree that the current picture is deeply disheartening and make a renewed commitment to working together to support learners with disabilities to access, to continue and to learn in safe and inclusive education. For the FCDO, this means using a twin-track approach to inclusive education. This means we provide both targeted support for learners with disabilities and seek to improve mainstream education systems to be inclusive. I'm pleased that this group has come together to discuss this crucial issue and look forward to seeing the outcomes of the session. By working together, we can set out and make the pandemic education recovery as inclusive as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. I clearly hear some very important points there. Children with disabilities being left out during the pandemic, a majority of them being vastly affected due to the inaccessibility of our digital systems. Before I introduce our next panelist, I also want to highlight that Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO, United Kingdom, has also been one of our constant and continuous supporter towards advancing disability inclusion, and we are very appreciative of all their interest in this area and everything that they have been doing. Our next panelist today is Robert Jenkins. Robert is the Global Director of Education with UNICEF. Unfortunately, Robert could not also join us in person today, but has sent us his remarks in a video, Reimagining Education and highlighting the role of digital accessibility. Asma, can I please request you to play Robert's video?
Hello, my name is Robert Jenkins, and I'm the Global Director of Education for UNICEF. Children with disabilities remain one of the most marginalized and excluded groups and face multiple barriers and challenges related to accessing education. Even pre-COVID-19, 50% of children with disabilities were not accessing school, and those in school were not learning at the same pace as their peers. Then COVID-19 has exacerbated this situation, and the related school closures have had particular impact on children with disabilities, including challenges related to accessing remote learning, but also as we now bridge back and return to school, particular effort needs to be directed towards reaching children with disabilities. We have worked very hard to reach every child during this challenging time, with particular emphasis on children with disabilities, but there's so much more that needs to be done. UNICEF's education strategy from 2019 to 2030, called Every Child Learns, put the most marginalized groups at the core of our work. With COVID-19, we were quick to respond and prioritize reaching girls and children with disabilities, children affected by conflict, other very challenging situations. But again, more needs to be done. The use of combined high-tech and low or no-tech strategies helped us ensure continuity of learning for many children, including those with limited access to digital learning. But the quality and the engagement opportunities with these solutions is continuing to be emphasized. The UNICEF Reimagined Education Initiative calls for a revolution and transformation of education, prioritizing the most marginalized children and young people, enable them to be connected to the internet and gain access to quality digital learning, including ensuring that all digital learning is relevant and accessible to every child and young person, including those with disabilities. Digital solutions presents a viable and effective way to reach every child with high-quality education wherever they are. Accessible digital learning solutions will ensure that learners with disabilities are not left behind. We are reimagining education so that every child has access to devices, to connectivity, to high-quality, relevant, and affordable content. Today, our team will launch the Accessible Digital Learning Portal, which includes tools to support inclusive education in classrooms, at home, and as children are moving. The resources are deployable in low and high resource environments and showcase approaches for the production, distribution, and implementation of accessible digital content for learners with disabilities, and aims to also support teachers, curriculum development, parents, and other key stakeholders. We appreciate the partnership with Norway, FCDO, GPE, and other bilateral and multilateral partners for their joint collaboration, and we look forward to our continued strategic partnership in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Isma. That was great. I clearly hear, and I'm sure others hear as well, the continuous emphasis on improving accessibility in digitalization to build back better, to make education available to learners with disabilities. And why not? When at a time when there is so much digitalization happening in everything around us, then why not just make it accessible and make it available to everyone? I would like to move on to our next panelist who is here with us today. Paul Lynch is a senior lecturer in education studies at the University of Glasgow. Thank you for being here, Paul. I want to talk to you about this report that you co-authored titled Using Educational Technology for Learners with Disabilities in Primary Education Settings in LMICS, a systematic review. And I would appreciate if you could talk to us about the challenges and opportunities that you saw in advancing inclusive education using digital accessibility. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Vibhu. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can see that. I'll put it into, so yes, I'm going to share some findings from that study that Vibhu just mentioned. But I'm also going to talk briefly about another study as well that we've been doing in Malawi. But I just wanted to iterate some of the things that have already been said by Camilla and our members from FCDO and Unicef, that school closures have really created a situation of where we see a spotlight on unequal levels of provision for learners with disabilities, particularly when government initiatives to supplement loss of learning by setting up TV programs for children with for lost learning wasn't really accessible to a lot of children. And this magnified the level of inequality in the provision of appropriate educational technology or assistive technology for these children. So it placed parents and carers at the forefront of supporting learning at home, which in turn increased levels of anxiety and tension in communities. And this is illustrated in a very small study that I've been doing with the University of Cambridge and University of Malawi, which took place during the lockdown in Malawi in between October and December 2020. So we carried out about 100 phone calls with parents and carers and 40 teachers. And so we found that learners with disabilities had little access to appropriate learning materials and support over these months. Parents felt powerless and unable to support the learning of their children. They didn't know sign language. They weren't even able to communicate with their own children. Children who were visually impaired or who were blind, they didn't know how to teach Braille. So this exacerbated the difficulties that parents in many respects didn't know what their children needed. And so this really magnified the problem of access for different groups of children with impairment. And what was interesting was the reopening of the schools, particularly the special schools, which have led to discussions of finding ways to increase opportunities for new ways of learning remotely through distance learning, particularly if there is another lockdown, which would lead to school closures. And so how would the government be able to respond to this demand? That was one of the biggest questions. So moving on to the actual study, which is now published, and I can put the link in the chat afterwards. It set out to learn from existing evidence of children of the support, what EdTech is being used to support learners of children aged 6 to 12. And the idea was to inform program and policy makers. So here we have a heat map showing the countries where we found evidence, just to say that this was based on peer-reviewed articles, not on non-peer-reviewed. So the evidence was quite small. As you can see from the map, or just to give you an indication that there were very few studies. They were thinly spread across the globe. We had 7 studies in India, 5 studies in Thailand, 4 in Kenya and 3 in Nigeria. So we therefore have significant concern in relation to the body of rigorous evidence coming from all these regions. So looking at the research designs and the methods that were used, there was a dominance of studies that were conducted testing and evaluating software programs with little or no engagement with pedagogy, learner engagement, or learning outcomes. So over half of the papers we found did not specify the duration of the study. And when they did, only 8 studies were greater than 8 months, and 16 studies were less than 3 months. So significant time, in terms of time, the studies were quite short. Looking more specifically at the type of impairment, there was a strong bias towards sensory impairment, with 20 studies covering deaf, hard of hearing, and 15 papers on low vision, blindness, and visual impairment. Interestingly, a total of 34 papers were located in special schools, and 3 papers didn't state where the study actually took place. So we have a significant number of studies in sensory impairment and in special schools. Now turning to what we found in terms of interesting examples of showing good potential. So there were a high number of studies in deaf or hard of hearing. Studies within these groups documented innovative ways of supporting the development of sign language, access to the curriculum, and developing independent skills through the use of games and computer software programs. There are examples of social media being used to teach sign language in different languages, all of which are accessible on mobile, Android phones or tablets. And also in terms of vision impairment, there was evidence of apps being used on Android phones to help learners to read and write Braille. Studies in Bangladesh and India have responded to the increasing use of low-cost mobiles, but they also point out that phones do not replace traditional ways of learning how to read Braille. And this is an important thing, that it doesn't replace the teacher's role. There's small but emerging evidence in the use of AAC, or augmentative and alternative communication. And it's showing good potential in increasing learning opportunities for learners on the autistic spectrum. This is mainly done by building on existing traditional strategies, using pictures and turning them into visual symbols. But again, the evidence is quite weak. So moving on to the key challenges. Identifying the right match between the individual and the technology is critical, and there seemed to be a lack of evidence of that taking place in the studies. There were instances where technology was actually hindering learners' access to learning because of poor assessment and lack of follow-up. It's also not an idea of one size fits all, where we simply allocate or distribute assistive technology to groups of learners with inadequate follow-up. Replicating or scaling up was not discussed in most studies, especially applying them in rural areas with little access to power or availability of EdTech in schools. Researchers often noted teachers' reluctance to adapt EdTech solutions to their everyday teaching. And this was due to a lack of familiarity of training in the use of different devices and how they can be used in the classroom. So taking the field forward, the full report sets out 7 recommendations for policy and 6 for research, but I'll just highlight a few here. So with a growing shift from using PCs, the traditional PCs in classrooms, to mobile and portable devices, investing in apps for phones has additional benefits for learners with disabilities where sustainable. Also, governments should invest more in technology that encourages greater learning opportunities for what we call ubiquitous, or learning anywhere and at any time within the school, residential setting, and or at home. A significant barrier to accessing technology is the consistently high cost of assistive technology, especially for learners with sensory impairments. Thus, there is an urgent need to seek formal arrangements or agreements with specialist suppliers for AT to find solutions to keep the costs at affordable levels. It's also important to source AT more locally in order to reduce additional import taxes and develop reliable supply chains within countries. And lastly, we need to carry out research that addresses the diversity of learners with disabilities through robust research designs, and also think about the intersectionality between such variables as gender, location, and socioeconomic status of learners. And we also need to ensure we involve learners with disabilities, their teachers and parents in all aspects of the study. And so we often hear the expression, what gets measured gets done. We therefore need to encourage more systematic recording of how EdTech is being used in different learning contexts so that we can make better informed decisions on what funders should invest in and why. So thank you very much for your time. And I'll post a link of the report into the chat.
Thank you so much, Paul. It was really great to hear you. Some very significant challenges that you have highlighted, lack of evidence, straight away pointing to the fact or to the need for data disaggregation, disability data disaggregation, which we do not have. Also, the serious fit one shoe to everyone model, which clearly needs to be changed because simply one technology cannot work for everyone. I'm visually impaired. I cannot work without my screen reader. Somebody who has a hearing disability need captioning. They would not be benefited by the screen reader. So clearly there is a huge need in the education sector for teachers and other stakeholders to understand that and provide appropriate assistive technology, the one that responds to the learner or to the needs of the learner. I am super excited to introduce our next two panelists, and I'll tell you why in a bit. But the next two panelists are Vangani Grace Tolo, who is a senior education advisor, gender equity and inclusion with UNICEF, and Elias Constantopoulos, who is a consultant for the Accessible Digital Learning Portal. To both of you, I invite you to speak to us and please tell us more about the work that UNICEF has been doing responding to the challenges on education for learners with disabilities during the pandemic. And this is why I'm so excited. I also invite you to tell us more about UNICEF's role and launch of the Accessible Digital Learning Portal. Over to both of you.
Thank you, Vibhu. And I also want to just acknowledge the previous panelists who have actually highlighted the challenges that children with disabilities have faced in accessing education during this pandemic, but also previously. And I cannot do justice by not highlighting that unprecedented impact that this pandemic has had on children. We all know that children with disabilities have actually fared among the worst in all aspects. We know that governments and partners have struggled to meet the unprecedented demands as a result of the disruption of services, ranging from education, which is at our heart of the work that we do, child protection, and also other social protection services. Specific to education, we know that the pandemic and the related school closures have exacerbated the barriers that children with disabilities face in accessing learning and performing at the same level with their peers. While governments have put in place strategies to ensure continuity of learning, we know that accessibility to remote learning modalities and connectivity has presented significant challenges for children with disabilities. As was previously indicated by our previous speaker, UNICEF estimated that more than 463 million children were not reached by any form of remote learning during these school closures. For those children that were not reached, most of these were characterized by poverty, but also rurality, but most of them were in communities that are not connected, and also disability, but also ethno-linguistic minorities, as content was delivered in languages that were foreign to them, and other vulnerabilities. And we know that digital learning has been the main approach for remote learning that has been implemented in many countries. Yet, we are also aware that more than half of the world's children and young people are on the wrong side of the digital divide, meaning that this limited their access to learning, and also they could not be able to participate and make use of the same opportunities as their connected peers who had access to those remote learning strategies. For children with disabilities, the challenges are acute and even greater because of the likelihood of experiencing poverty and also inability to find learning content that is accessible according to their needs. What we know is that this intersectionality has significant impact on these children and would impact their future if not action is taken to address these timely. Data that was done by UNICEF shows that in over 50% countries that were surveyed, governments failed to adopt measures aimed at facilitating learning for children with disabilities, and we know that means going forward. We also know that children with disabilities have been less likely to benefit from distance learning solutions, as many lack support at home. This was also highlighted by a previous speaker in terms of parents not being able to make use of Braille, not being able to have the skills to support the specific needs of learners with disabilities. Moreover, we are aware that the inadvertent secondary effects of lockdowns, school closures, and the resultant disruptions in routines and schedules have increased anxiety and depression, as well as social isolation, and as well as the exacerbation of pre-existing mental health among children with disabilities. These impacts will have been compounded for children with disabilities in the absence of community support networks, but also access to essential services. I want to highlight at this point that even before COVID, as was indicated by Robert Jenkins, the Global Director for Education, children with disabilities were a key priority for UNICEF. The UNICEF overall organizational strategy and the education strategy put emphasis on strategies to address inequalities for the most vulnerable populations. In education, for instance, we were already taking progressive steps to create equal opportunities by promoting inclusive education. Digital learning was already a key strategy for ensuring inclusion for children with disabilities in our work. We are now going to show you a video that actually demonstrates a pilot program on accessible digital textbooks that UNICEF piloted in a number of selected countries. At the moment, this program is actually being rolled out in more than 7 countries. Over to you, Asma, to play that short video. Thank you.
Transforming education, making textbooks accessible to all learners. Kenneth, 14, from Uganda, is deaf.
I can get confused if there's no one there to explain things.
Henry, 13, is blind.
We cannot set the chalkboard.
Ed, 13, is blind.
I don't see any reason why we should be kept aside from those who don't have disabilities.
Robert Nkwangu, National Union of Disabled Persons, Uganda.
If there's a book written in text, some people aren't able to read it because of their disability.
Rosangela Berman-Bieler, UNICEF.
The best way for learners with disabilities, or deaf or blind or have intellectual disabilities, to really learn like their peers is through digital books.
Robert Nkwangu.
Imagine a book with choices, so the visually impaired can read through audio, and the deaf can read it with a sign language video.
David Gitao, teacher, Kenya.
Children, they'll be able to carry the book with ease, and not only one, but a number of books. And of course, they can be able to access it at home.
When barriers are removed and children with disabilities are included in regular schools, we see them getting to the top of their classes.
Sarah Bogosi, Uganda Ministry of Education and Sports.
We adapted the materials we gave to the schools, and the results were quite impressive.
The teacher can put a lesson on the computer. You listen in class so that we learn together.
Kenneth is deaf.
The laptops help me understand more.
Joy Wadimo, teacher.
A person who is on the laptop is like a real teacher. He's teaching while signing.
Omeri, 12, is deaf.
It has helped me learn to read.
Bernard, 17, from Kenya.
I like that I can choose what I want to see on the tablet.
Peter Owaga, Kenya Association of the Intellectually Handicapped.
It is the first time that I interact with it in the tablet. It has pictures with some easy to read and understandable literature. They could easily access the material, and I was so much impressed.
Sri Rupa.
Thank you, Asma, for that short video. As you can see from that video, digital learning can be a viable solution to truly inclusive education systems, and also a key strategy for achieving universal design for learning. The COVID-19 school-related closures have also demonstrated the potential for digital solutions to learning and for building resilient education systems in case of future crises. While COVID-19 will have long-term negative effects on education for marginalized groups, we at Unicef see an opportunity to reimagine education and address long-standing systemic inequalities by making quality digital learning available for all children, whoever and wherever they are, and to make education truly inclusive for all. Through our Reimagined initiative, we are building on what works to make digital learning a reality for all by ensuring access to devices, connectivity, affordability, but also making sure that we are putting in those digital learning solutions quality and relevant content, whilst also ensuring that we integrate the voices of people that are affected, which are young people, including those with disabilities, in order to meet their needs. Today, with the generous support from GPE and our partners, we are launching the Accessibility Digital Learning Portal to ensure availability of resources and information on how to develop accessible learning content, including for learning with disabilities. The portal is an outcome of requests from countries to support and to ensure that children with disabilities were included in remote and blended learning programs. My colleague Elias will now demonstrate how the portal works, as well as how it can apply to various contexts and be used by a range of stakeholders. Over to you, Elias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wangani, and thank you, Vibhu, as well. I'm just going to share my screen now, a moment. Is that clear? Yes? Great, fantastic. So this is the digital learning portal. I'm just going to take you through a short demo of how to navigate the website and some of the content that we have featured here. This is the homepage of the portal. At the top, we have a menu bar that you can use to navigate the different resources. And I'm going to scroll down this homepage here. There's a welcome message, and we have quick links to get started for educators, learners, parents, policymakers, and publishers. The site was focusing initially on resources to help people create and disseminate accessible digital content. But we also realized during the creation of the portal that the resources could benefit educators, learners, and parents. And so we wanted to make them as accessible for those groups as possible. I'm going to scroll down this homepage all the way to the bottom, where you can see links to access different pages on the website, including stories and implementation examples from the field, from other UNICEF projects all over the world. So I'm going to go up. You can click on the initiative link in the menu bar at the top. Here on this page, you can read about the challenge, the solution, and the resources that we have looked at for this particular portal. The second tab at the top is the Catalogue. Here on the Catalogue, we have currently about 120 pieces of accessible content, platforms, and tools that support accessible digital learning. To create the Catalogue, we looked at a number of different categories and tagged resources that we thought would be most helpful to support accessible digital learning. We tagged resources by who are they for: educators, learners, parents, policymakers, and publishers. The user needs: everyone, communication, hearing, learning, mobility, and vision. The type of resource: this is quite a long list, but it includes content libraries, AAC, assistive technologies, and more. The cost of the resource, if it's free, open source, or paid, as well as the country or languages that that resource is in. We currently have materials in approximately 30 languages on the portal, but we're looking to grow that with an addition of country-specific resources from our colleagues at other Unicef country offices. We also included within our tagging by age, as well as by connectivity level, and you can search for that within the keyword box. I will just give a really brief demonstration of how to actually search for resources. As you can see, it's quite a long list, but say I want to look for AAC resources. That stands for Alternative Augmentative Communication. If I click on AAC here on the filter, it will filter the list below, and I can see I received 8 results. The first being Board Builder, the second being Seaboard Cough Drop. I'm going to click on one of these resources, Seaboard, and it will open up onto a page with a small screenshot demonstrating what that particular resource is about, a assessment of how that resource can help, and also related products to that resource that you can explore. So I can go over here to the related products section, and I'm going to click on Global Symbols, which is another site. Global Symbols features open AAC symbol sets that you can use to build AAC boards. So I can escape out of this. In addition, this catalog is accessible and navigable with a keyboard and screen reader. So you don't need to have a mouse or a keyboard. You should be able to navigate this in a variety of ways. I'll show you another example. If I'm an educator, I can click here and see resources for me. I might be just really interested in content libraries. So I'm going to look for that. And I scroll down. Oh, I see the Global Digital Library. So I'm able to click on that, read about that, and visit the website. So I encourage you to please visit the link, explore the portal, and let us know if you find it helpful. We have at the top here a Submit Resource button. It's in the top menu. By clicking on Submit Resource, we invite the community to submit resources they think that would be most helpful for the catalog in a variety of different formats. You can actually fill out and tag the resource yourself, and Unicef will review that resource and then decide whether we can put it up onto the catalog. I'm going to keep on navigating through. After the catalog tab, there is a section called Resources, where we have a number of different articles, including implementation examples and the UNICEF Education Resources Catalog and Inclusive Education Practical Guide. So if you click on the Inclusive Education Resources Catalog, you'll be taken to download this PDF. The Resources Catalog is separated into 3 sections: resources for teachers and school directors, resources for parents and caregivers, and resources for both. And this includes a lot of resources that are low tech. The Accessible Digital Learning Portal has a lot of technology resources as well to accompany this. And finally, the last tab is the Contact tab, where you can get in touch with us, let us know what you think, and request for additional resources to be added. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Wangani.
Thank you, Arias. I think some really exciting innovation there to make learning as accessible as possible to all learners, but most specifically to ensure that we are including learners with disabilities in our programming, and also to just make sure we have good learning outcomes for that population group. What we can see from what all the previous speakers have emphasized is that digital education is here to stay, with or without the pandemic. As such, it is important to proactively address inclusion and accessibility to ensure children with disabilities are not left behind as digital learning expands in the future. I want to acknowledge that the development of the portal has been a very consultative process with several consultations with key education stakeholders around the world, including persons with disabilities, EdTech and assistive tech experts. It is also important to emphasize that this is work in progress, as Elias has indicated. We have started this work to develop this one-stop shop on accessible digital learning, but there's still much more to do to strengthen the portal and expand its impact. For instance, in the future, we want to crowdsource the additional resources for the catalog from the community, focusing on receiving country-specific resources from our regional and country offices, but also other stakeholders. We also plan to localize the site by adding support for additional languages. We plan to release a digital accessibility toolkit with tutorials and step-by-step videos for creating accessible documents and utilizing accessible tools to facilitate accessible digital learning. We also plan to update the existing catalog and resources regularly to ensure that the site is up to date and relevant. Besides the portal, we also recognize that we need a broader range of solutions and options to support different contexts and needs by developing resources for both low-tech and no-tech contexts, including for all persons to ensure that they access learning. I'm therefore happy to also indicate that besides the portal, we have developed two other resources that Elias referred to. One, an inclusive education resource catalog, which includes low-tech and no-tech resources for teachers, educators, and parents to support blended learning and remote learning. And second, we are also launching an inclusive education practical guide that aims to support school directors, teachers, and other professionals in making decisions that ensure children from vulnerable populations, and in this case, particularly children with disabilities, continue to receive education and associated services, even when schools are physically closed. I encourage everyone to make use of these resources and share these with your networks, including organizations of persons with disabilities, governments, donor partners, and other key stakeholders. We also look forward to continuing to collaborate with our partners, the GPE, Norway, and FCDO, to take this initiative forward and to scale it while also addressing the points that I've stated earlier on how we can improve the portal and our other resources. What we believe in at UNICEF is that together we can make education truly inclusive for learners with disabilities, and ask all of you to join us in this very important mission. Thank you, and I pass it back to you, back to you, Vibhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Wangani. I think Vibhu's tech is acting up once again. So while we wait for her to rejoin, I would just like to say thank you to you and Elias for that great presentation. Definitely very exciting to learn about the portal, and encourage our participants to please visit the portal. The link has been shared in the chat box. And please do share your feedback with us. We would welcome your comments and your feedback. While we wait for Vibhu to reconnect, I think if we can perhaps have a couple of questions for the moderator. We've been receiving questions, and to start with, Paul, if I can just ask you a question, if you don't mind talking to us a little bit about, we know that children with disabilities, as we've been discussing today, face several barriers, are presented with several barriers to participate in education and to utilize assistive technologies in mainstream classrooms. One of those key barriers is that in many cases, as you and several other speakers have acknowledged, is that teachers don't always have the knowledge, the support, the resources to actually be able to integrate technology effectively into the classroom and use it as a learning tool. Could you please shed some light on what could be included in teacher preparation programs to prepare teachers to be able to better use education and assistive technologies for and with children with disabilities?
Yes, thanks, Asma. In fact, the study, the systematic study literature review actually revealed noticeable gaps in teachers' understanding and skills around even the most basic types of technology. So even the mobile in their pocket that they could use in break time could actually be a very powerful tool, a powerful way of actually supporting children with disabilities. The other thing is about teacher training, that assistive technology, around assistive technology is also very little known in many countries that we explored. So I think the training should be on two levels. So there should be a systematic inclusion of assistive technology and basic technology in initial teacher training colleges as part of the primary and also secondary curriculum. There should be training to improve digital literacy. So for example, looking at ways of using mobile technology more creatively within the core curriculum, but also in terms of supporting children with specific impairments, for example, vision impairment, and to be able to apply that knowledge as soon as possible, as quickly into the classroom. And so that transferability is really important, and that it doesn't just stay as a sort of theoretical ideas in a teacher training college or an in-service program. It's the practicalities of it. And so technology, mobile technology could help children to access print, record a lesson, and the video actually shows some excellent examples of how teachers are supporting children through different devices. And there's more specific training on assistive technology for impairment-specific groups, although this training would be best suited to teachers who have already received some training on that particular impairment, such as vision impairment and autism, or in terms of cerebral palsy, how to support. So there are different levels. So teachers, specialist teachers, would require specific training on how to use assistive technology for that impairment. And so teachers can think more about the technology moving with the child, especially if there are school closures. The learner needs to become more independent. Teachers need to be more open-minded and not frightened that the teachers know more about the technology than they do, and that it's fine not to know, and that that children can actually help teachers learn how to use it. And so they should encourage the student to learn. So it's moving away from the sort of fixed PC ideas to more low-tech, mobile, different types of devices. And teachers really do need to know that we're not just talking about PCs and laptops. We're actually talking about a whole range of devices, including white canes, reading stands, and a whole range of devices.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really helpful. I see Vibhu's been able to rejoin. So Vibhu, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Asma. I have no idea why is my technology playing games today. But thank you so much, Paul. I missed the beginning of your answer, but I did hear it in the middle, and I did hear you end it. And I was really interested to hear that from you. Why? Because my personal history behind it is a couple of years ago, I was doing my master's in inclusive education at the University of Edinburgh. And I used to ask my tutors a lot of questions. One of them even commented, "How many questions would you ask?" So, yeah, so I did have a lot of questions for the panelists here, and I think it's important. It's very important that we train teachers or the teacher preparation programs include elements of using assistive technologies, because one of the things that I recall from my experience being a student of Masters in Inclusive Education, as I said, I did my dissertation on practices of primary mainstream school teachers in teaching children with visual impairment, and I was surprised because in a country which is as hugely developed as United Kingdom and in Scotland, where you have additional support for Learning Act and whatnot, teachers were saying, we haven't had the training. We don't know what they do. And that is why we are not able to use assistive technologies. Well, I want to go next to you, Vangani, and I have a question for you, because as I said, I do ask many questions. So one of the challenges that we see in digital learning is that learners who are in remote environments or who have resource constraint or have low connectivity are not able to benefit from digital solutions. So how do you think equity could be central to the current and ongoing efforts? Over to you, Vangani.
Thank you, Vibhu. I think that's a very important question, and a question that is quite recurrent in all the sessions that we are having around the push to digital learning and exacerbating inequalities. What we can say about that is that with Unicef and the work that we are doing, with any strategy that we want to roll out, we always put equity at the center of that, ensuring that whatever interventions, we have really done a detailed analysis in terms of how that will will actually address questions of inequalities and making sure that we are bridging those gaps between those who are from vulnerable populations and those that are a bit able to do things on their own. What we have done with this accessible digital learning portal is to include resources that can apply in both high-tech, low-tech, but also no-tech context, to make sure that even those in no context can be able to use resources from the portal. Second, we are also looking at doing an analysis of and putting together an accessibility toolkit that actually, in terms of applying universal design principles to program-related courses. So what this does is that it includes detailed checklists, assessments, tools, as well as guidance on low-cost solutions and case studies, including those case studies to demonstrate how this can be done in different contexts. We are looking to launch this in the fall of 2021, so it will also provide stakeholders and various audiences with examples of how you can actually do digital, so we can actually apply digital solutions in low tech. But also our strategy within Reimagined Education is actually looking at all angles. One is that we are working to ensure accessibility to devices, so that includes an element of service provision, but at the same time we are also engaging with various providers of networks to ensure that all content is negotiated and accessed at zero rating, in the sense that users don't necessarily have to pay for using that particular content unless they're actually working with closed source resources. But at the same time, we are also ensuring that we accommodate as much as possible the voices of the users of our technology, our solutions, our interventions, to make sure that we build that into the design of our program so that we don't necessarily leave anyone behind. So we will be following up with additional tools that address some of these accessibility challenges and cost-related challenges, particularly for communities that are poor in resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Vangani. Camilla, I want to ask you a question. So we know that the pandemic has resulted in significant budget cuts, economic cuts to domestic and foreign aid and investment. So what, according to you, are some of the strategies that could be implemented immediately to continue supporting learners with disabilities in mainstream schools?
Thank you, Vibhu. First of all, given what we've heard here today, I think we can safely say that it is more important than ever before that we do uphold our financial commitments to education and inclusion. Norway more than doubled our education finance between 2013 and 2017, and we have maintained the level ever since. We have also maintained the level of education spending in the last 2 years. Moreover, in order to sustain the support for inclusive education for children with disabilities, it will be important with data, information, and advocacy. The Global Education Monitoring Report 2020, Inclusion and Education, All Means All, is an important step in this regard. Also, we need to make sure that countries, multilateral organizations, global funds, and civil society organizations all work to improve availability and quality of data that can inform us of the status and contribute to improved awareness. Norway has, for instance, encouraged the Global Partnership for Education and Education Cannot Wait to increase and improve data on inclusion in their respective resort frameworks. I believe that there is much that we can do to improve data and information in collaboration with all key stakeholders, and that this could lead to sustained or even improved financing at country and global levels.
Thank you, Camilla. I really appreciate that answer. Yes, all means all, and this includes learners with disabilities because we cannot segregate them if we are talking about inclusion. I really want to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to all our panel members who gave very insightful presentations and answered all our questions with so much detail. In order to build back better and use digital accessibility as a tool to support inclusive education, we must progressively develop and distribute learning content in accessible media. At the same time, we also need to promote the use of devices that allow learners with disabilities to not only access the material on them, but are also easy for them to use. We also need to advance and enhance the access to education along with access to assistive technology. Finally, I would like to encourage and appeal everybody who has listened to this webinar and will circulate it further to visit the Accessible Digital Learning portal at www.accessibledigitalearning.org. Once again, it is www.accessibledigitalearning.org. On behalf of Unicef, Global Partnership on Education, GPE, Norway Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, who were the organizers of today's side event, I would like to express my heartiest and sincere thanks to all the panel members and the audience for joining us today. Thank you and wish you a very happy COSP week ahead. We'll now close the panel. Thank you so much.